Today we're going to talk about how to look at projects and see if they're actually going to repay and what we look for, what the investor should look for to try to understand how likely the project is going to repay on time. So first, when you're looking at different EB-5 projects, it's super important to understand that different investors and different companies who invest in the exact same project get different rights. So it's very possible, for example, for a bank, EB-5 investors and a developer to invest in the same project, and only 2 out of the 3 parties get paid in full, but the other party doesn't get paid at all. So for example, a bank and the EB-5 investors can get repaid and the developer would lose money. Or it's possible that the bank and the developer can get repaid and the EB-5 investors would lose money. So it's important to understand that when you're investing in a project, not every party gets treated the same, right? Different investments get different rights and different priorities. So it's not like, okay, the project was built for $100 million, sold for 70 million, there was a 30% loss, everybody takes a 30% haircut, but still gets back 70%. That's not how it works. People who are in line to get repaid first can get 100% of their money back, versus those individuals who are second or third in line in repayment or have different repayment rights may get nothing. So that's why, as an EB-5 investor, it is really important to read the agreements and to look at the capital stack. That's something we do for our investors when we analyze business projects. So how do you determine if a project is likely to repay specifically EB-5 investors? Number one, you look at where in the position in the capital stack the EB-5 money is located. Is it a loan or is it equity? A loan means EB-5 investors are giving the money to the developer, and the developer has a legal obligation to repay that money at a certain point, and the loan can be secured by the assets of the project. The investors don't own a piece of the project, right? So they don't own a piece of the project, they just have a legal obligation for the developer to repay, and then they can sell. If the developer does not repay, they potentially can foreclose on this project. Equity is different. If you're coming in as equity investors, that means you're gonna co-own a piece of the project together with the developer. But that also means that often there is no set time for you to get repaid. So if the project got built, say it's a hotel or apartment complex and it's operating, the developer can keep the building for 10 years, for 12 years. They have no obligation to sell it so that they repay the capital. Hopefully that building is profitable and you as an equity investor are also getting a percentage of that deal. Bye, ladies. But if it's not profitable, you may just be stuck in this project, not generating annual return, and there is no legal obligation for the developer to repay. So super important to understand, are you going in as a credit investor, so you're giving a loan to the developer with an obligation to repay, or are you going in as an equity investor? Second, it's important if you're going in as, if you're providing debt, meaning you're giving credit to the developer, it's important to understand which line item you are on to get repaid. Are you in the first lien position, meaning you and other EB-5 investors are first in line on the asset, on the land, on the project to get repaid? Or are you in the second place, or you're in the third place? And who's in front of you? So I'll give you a common example. In EB-5, a lot of times you have a bank that loans the money to the project. So we're building a $100 million hotel. A bank is providing 50 million. EB-5 investors are providing 20 million. And the developer is providing 30 million. The bank will typically be in the first lien position. So when the asset is sold, the first 50 million goes to the bank, which you may think sounds okay because first 50 million goes to the bank, we're in the second in line. So if the building is built for 100 million, as long as they sell it for $70 million, the bank and us, the investors, are going to get repaid because the bank gave 50, we gave 20. But here's the trick with that. The problem is the bank charges an interest every single year. And it's not just the bank's principal that's the first in line to get repaid. The bank is entitled to also have the accumulated interest repaid. So for example, if the developer built the building, it was operating, but it wasn't generating a lot of profit, and this developer was not making his interest payments to the bank, those interest payments start to accumulate. An easy example saying the bank gave the money at 50 million at, say, 5%. That means there's going to be 2.5 million of accumulated interest every single year. So what that means is if the developer did not pay that annual interest, in 3 years, you will owe the bank 50 million plus 7.5 million of unaccumulated interest. So that's 57.5 million that's going to go to the bank first. So these things can create a situation where you see that the project was built, it's operating, it was sold, but investors may still not get the full repayment of the principal because whoever is first in line gets paid their full principal plus accumulated interest. So when we're analyzing projects, that becomes something we analyze. How much money did the developer put in? Typically, the developer owns equity and they're the last in line to get repaid. So whatever money the developer has put in, if the building is sold, the developer cannot take any of that money until they have repaid the bank and EB-5 investors. But sometimes the documents allow the developer to take out equity early, and that's something we as brokers would look for. If a developer is saying that they're putting in 30% of the budget, but they have the right to take that money out before repaying EB-5 investors in the bank, that's a huge problem because that's going to create additional risk for the EB-5 investors. Also, some people are going to say, okay, well, that's easy. Then I just want to go into the projects where I'm first in line, I'm a senior loan position. And it sounds amazing, and I apologize, guys, for the background noise because, as I mentioned, I'm at a conference and now a session was just let out, so there are more people coming through and talking. So if you're looking at, senior loan positions, that also can work, but if a project says, hey, EB-5 investors, you're going to be first in line to get repaid because you have a first lien position, and the developer is going to contribute, say, EB-5 investors contribute half of the budget, EB-5 developer is contributing the other half. That doesn't mean 100% that you are not going to take a loss, right? Because you want to ask the next question, which is how much equity did this developer already spend? Did they buy the land? Did they buy the building? Did they actually accumulate? Did they actually put in their money first? Because sometimes developers say, hey, we will give you first lien position and we will put in all this equity. But what they actually do is they take the EB-5 money first and they use that money to buy the land and start construction, and they haven't added any of their own money yet. So if the project stalls midway through, there's changes, cost changes, they can stop the project, and when they go to sell the assets, it's only EB-5 money that was spent and none of their own cash was in yet. So seeing where you are in the capital stack, first, second, third position, seeing how much money everybody has already put in. Did the developer actually spend the money, or are they promising to do that in the future? And then, of course, so that's kind of the first line of how we determine how likely investors are going to get repaid and also what the additional risks there are, right? And then another way we can look at the likelihood of repayment is what kind of asset is this? So I'll give you an example. There's some assets that are more recession-proof, and there are other assets that are less recession-proof. Because you're investing your money for the next few years. Today, maybe the economy is doing well, but we don't know how the economy is going to do 4 or 5 years from now. So one of the assets that we see that tends to fluctuate a lot is office space buildings. In the good economy, office buildings are very profitable. They can generate a lot of returns for the developer. But if there's a strong economic, recession, as we've seen in 2008, as we once again saw in 2020 in COVID, office buildings start to lose money because usually office spaces are rented for a few years and companies can easily give up their office space. So if the economy dives down, companies get shut down, they break their leases, they can move out, they can just simply shorten their leases or not rent office space, right? They can reduce the amount of staff, or they can tell their staff not to come to the office and work remotely. That doesn't necessarily happen to the same degree with apartment complexes, because when an apartment building rents out apartments, COVID, no COVID, recession, no recession, these people still need to sleep and eat and live somewhere. So when the recession happens, you don't usually see 30% of residents of an apartment complex moving out, right? You may have a slight drop in rent, people may shift around and want to move to slightly cheaper places, but the reality is apartment complexes tend to be much more recession-proof, and they tend to not have as strong of a drop as something like office space. And then there's other kind of assets that you can look at, whether they're hospitals. There's certain businesses that stay open no matter what the economy is, and certain businesses that thrive in good economy and tend to slow down substantially in bad economy. So I'm going to answer some questions before I kind of move on. So one of the questions we have is, what if the project absolutely denies to pay and gives legitimate account that their business is in a loss and would not be able to repay? Well, if it's legitimate, then it's legitimate. So if you invested in a business that, it depends what your assets were, what was securing your assets, what kind of company you invested in. But say you invested in a construction of a hotel. The hotel was built and it's not generating enough profit, and now they have to sell it at a fraction of the construction cost, and that amount of money is only enough to repay a senior bank loan. Then that means that the EB-5 investors may take a total loss. This is why it's so important to look at a project before you invest it and try to project how the situation may play out if things go badly. I always say everybody has a beautiful plan A. When you're looking at project documents, they always tell you a plan A. We're going to build this hotel, we're going to generate this much profit. We're going to build this condo building, we're going to generate this much profit. We're going to build this hospital, it's going to do A, B, and C. That's plan A. You as an investor want to think, okay, worst case scenario, if you're building this and there's a serious economic decline and you're not generating this much profit, but you're generating half of it, is there still enough money in the project? Was there enough investment from the developer to return my principal? Or does that mean that when you are not generating enough income, I as an EB-5 investor will lose my money? Right? So always look at the potential plan B or kind of worst case scenario and see which assets are protecting you. I'll give you another example. Right now, one of the projects I'm looking at, we're investing in a construction of kind of a manufacturing facility, but the security that the EB-5 lenders are getting, we're in a first lien position, and our loan is secured by the existing land. Right? So the developer already accumulated all this land. They bought it with their own cash. There's no other loans. We get first lien position on this land. This land happens to have a lot of resources. And today it is priced. So by objective, if nothing gets built, nothing moves forward, if we just have to take this land and sell it to repay investors, it's worth a few times more than the money that the EB-5 investors are putting in towards the manufacturing building. So that's a good security. That's a good plan B. Say if the they stall, the industry changes, we can still sell the land and it's worth more money than we're lending to this company. So Yeah, and then there somebody put in the comments that in EB-5 the investors are not guaranteed the money back. 100%. These are private investments. So the whole point and the reason why I even do what I do, the reason why I even have a job is because there's no guarantee. The government doesn't guarantee the return. So each investor has to be prudent in reviewing different investment options to try to understand and compare them and try to pick one where the financial risks are minimized versus just throwing their money at different projects that are interested in taking it. Okay. I love that someone is asking what EB-5 is. Please do follow this account and look at some general videos that we have. EB-5 is a government program that allows for nationals to obtain a green card if they make a qualifying investment into a project that generates 10 jobs in the U.S. economy. Okay, so we did talk about your position in the capital stack, whether it's senior loan, mezzanine loan, so second position, or equity position. We talked about looking the actual cash contributions before the EB-5 money comes in, so making sure that if the developer says they're contributing equity, that it was already contributed. Next, I want to talk about other lenders. A common question that investors will ask, like, if there's a bank involved in my project, is it good or bad? It can be both. So the good thing, if there's a bank that's also lending to the project where you're going to be an investor, and the bank is in the first lien position, depending who the bank is, if it's a big financial institution, the good thing is that usually their money is in first and the money gets spent before your money is in. It helps us because it starts job creation. So by the time you as an EB-5 investor go into the project, most of the jobs may have already been created. It also helps because what that means is that there are professional underwriters of a big financial institution that looked at the projections of this project and decided that they're accurate and decided that this project is likely to succeed. Because banks also don't want to put their money into a project that's not going to succeed. So knowing that there is another set of eyes, another independent company that performed their own underwriting and calculations and moved forward with this project can be a very positive thing, right? But then the downside is if that bank is in the first lien position and we as EB-5 investors are behind the bank, it can also create a vulnerable situation because when the building is built, part of the money that's going to get generated from the sale or refinancing of the building is going to go to that bank. Not only how much money they gave, but also the accumulated interest. So generally, I don't love to go into a project if the bank loan is more than 50% of the entire capital stack. Because when you go into 60, 70%, it starts to get a little dangerous, right? Because 50% plus a few years of possible and accumulated interest if the project is not doing well, all of a sudden the bank owns 70% of this project. And so if we sell the building at a discount, most of the money is going to go to the bank. At the same time, if you're not investing in year one, maybe you're investing in year 3 of construction. So the bank already provided its money, 2 years of construction are already finished, and you're coming in at the very tail end. So we have a reduced risk of construction, much reduced risk of construction budget overflows. The asset seems to be closer to already starting to operate and generate cash. At that point, maybe we will go into a project even if the bank loan is 55 or 65%, as long as they've already invested that money and the majority of the construction was done, right? Because by then we have the lending risk that's higher, but the construction risk that has already minimized, and also job creation risk. So I like to say it's a balanced scale, right? We have construction delay risks. There's a difference between going into a project in year 1 of construction where you can have budget overruns, problems with the construction. You have bad weather that's affecting and delaying the process. So you look at the construction risk. You go in year one, or you go in when the building is 90% completed. Big difference, right? So then you have your capital stack risk, where you are in the capital position. Then you have, how much the developer has put in. Then you have your job creation risk. How far along are they in the job creation process? Also, how many jobs do they need? How many other EB-5 investors they have? So if you're well secured in the job risk, that's a good thing. Then you have the immigration approval risk. Did this project already file their petition, or are they did they get approved, or are they still waiting for the approval? So when we're looking at the risks, if say the construction risk is high, but the capital risk is low, the job risk is low, and the approval risk is low, then overall this project might be something that we may still go into, even its early stages of construction, right? And then we may compare it to another project where the construction risk is low because they're at the end of the construction cycle, but they had a lot of credits that they've accumulated. So we are way in the back in the capital stack. Maybe their job creation, they don't have as much of a cushion because they took in a lot of EB-5 investors and there's not as much job creation. Maybe they only filed their documents with immigration recently and don't have the approval. So if the construction risk is low, but all the other risks are high, we're not going to go into this project just because the construction risk is low, right? We want, these like 4 or 5 different risk categories, and we want them pretty balanced, either all low or some of them have to be super low if one is a little bit higher, right? With anything, I always say money is always at risk. If you put your money in a bank, in the US, most banks don't fail, but banks have failed before, and they can fail. So you can put your money in a bank, come back 2 weeks later and not be able to take it back, right? There's FDIC insurance, but there's a limit. In other countries, this happens all the time. People put their money in a bank, 2 months later they come and try to withdraw, and the bank went under. So you can put your money under a mattress. It's not 100% safe. Someone can rob you, you can have a flood, you can have a fire. So money is almost always at some sort of risk. It's just a question of higher or lower risks. And the best way that you can lower your risks and the best way to protect yourself is to really educate yourself, take your time in reviewing the projects, and really engage professionals who understand how the different operations of the project happen, right? So I'm happy, obviously, to assist investors through this process, and we put in a lot of effort. At the end of the day, you will still be putting your money at some sort of risk, but our goal is to really try to eliminate unnecessary risks. Okay. All right, let me see if we have more questions. At this point, I don't see any more questions. So I will summarize. Another thing, one last category. So we talked about the capital stack. We talked about when the money comes in, the order in which you get repaid. Another thing that is important to also look for in a project is the timelines that they give to investors. Most EB-5 contracts have 2 timelines. One is their initial term. So most of the projects will say the initial term is 3 years. But you also have to look at the extensions. Most of the EB-5 projects allow the developer to take a certain amount of extensions. Usually it's a 1-year extension, but they may have multiple options. So the contracts may say it's a 3-year term and 2 1-year extensions. What does that mean? That means the developer is supposed to repay in 3 years, but if the developer needs more time, they can extend this to 4 years and extend it to 5 years. Each time they exercise their 1-year extension. This is a common thing in almost all EB-5 offerings. So this is something that I highly encourage investors to look at. Don't just look at the initial term. Look at how many additional extensions this developer has, because these extensions are almost fully unrestricted, meaning if the developer wants to extend, they can. So that's another thing that's important to understand. How many extensions and when and under which circumstances the developer can extend. Another analysis I like to sometimes do, like if we have a 4-year term and 2 1-year extensions, if the project is meant to be constructed and sold. So for example, if it's a single family residential community, they're building homes, as soon as construction is finished, those homes get sold and cash from the buyers comes in. If the timeline for the construction is 4 years, then we know with super high probability that this developer is actually going to repay in 4 years, because there's nothing else they can do with that money, right? They spend the money on building these homes. In 4 years, the buyers that they were building them for are going to give them the cash and take possession of the homes. So that cash is going to become available for them to repay EB-5 investors. They may still have optional extensions, but those extensions are really like for worst case scenario if the construction got delayed or there was an issue. It's not likely that they're actually going to use those extensions. However, if you're lending your money towards a hotel and they just started construction, they need another 2 years to finish construction, and the loan term says 4 years plus 2-year extensions. The likelihood of that developer utilizing these extensions is extremely high, because if you're building a hotel, you finish in 2 years, then you're operating the hotel for 2 years. If you have a brand new hotel that's only been in operation for 2 years, it's very hard for that developer to either sell this asset or to go to a bank and refinance EB-5 investors, because 2 years of hotel operations may not be sufficient to show any sort of substantial income. So if we're looking at an asset like this, we invested in a hotel, 4+2 term, there's a very high probability that the developer is going to use up the extensions. Because what's going to happen is the developer is going to keep the hotel operating for year 3 and year 4. Once they have more than 3 years of operating history and profitability that they can show, they can usually go to a bank and secure a loan, repay investors, or they can sell the hotel to an institutional buyer because they can show the profitability from this asset. So I hope this helps. Look at the position where you are in the repayment stack, debt or equity. See if you are first lien, second lien, third lien. Check to see which cash has already been contributed or has to get contributed before your EB-5 money gets to go into construction. Look at the construction timeline, and are you coming in at the beginning? Are you coming in at the end? And of course, look at the assets itself. Is it hotel? Is it, a logistics building? What is the exit strategy? Are they supposed to sell the building? Are they supposed to refinance it? Are they supposed to get cash from operations and repay you over time? Those are things that are important to look at. And of course, look at the legal terms. What's the minimum and maximum to understand the likelihood of your repayment and the timeline. Again, happy to help you guys with your individual project selection and review. And you can reach out to us. You can either DM us or go to EB-5 support. So that's EB-5support.com and sign up for a consultation.